Charles from Pennsylvania, any and all pronouns. I asked God to change my life, and he did. Charles, you're on Talk Heathen. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing real good. I hope you are too.
I've never had a bad day in my life.
Good. Yeah, let me first say that I've met a few atheists, and I think they're really smart people, really cordial, nice people. You know, some aren't, but for the most part, atheists, they seem pretty smart and just easy to get along with. And I don't think any of you are going to be thrown into hell or anything like that. I think, you know, God wants different people in this world to so he's not bored, because if everybody was the same, everybody was pretty much the same. It would be kind of boring, I guess.
Well, I appreciate that. I can say the same thing for I've met a lot of Christians that are very cool people. I used to work for a Catholic who had a PhD in atomic and molecular physics, and he was a charming dude. So it's very, very kind of you to start the call that way, Charles. What did you want to talk about today?
Well, to be blunt, I randomly found a photograph of my grandfather on eBay about 6 years ago when I was sitting around bored I said, I'm going to look at old cars on eBay to pass the time. I'm 64 years old, and my grandfather was a police officer in Monessen, Pennsylvania, back in the 1920s and 30s. Anyway, Grandpa died when I was a 4-month-old baby, and I could get to it later how I knew the picture to recognize it, but I was sitting in a water truck at a gas well in West Virginia about 6 years ago, and we're sitting in line bored. I said, I'll be here a while. I'm going to look at old cars on eBay to pass the time, and I like old 64 Fairlane sports coupes. So I look at that on eBay sometimes, and I put that on eBay, Fairlane, and the very first one on the list was a 1958. I really don't like them that much, but I was bored. I clicked it on, reading about a nice old car. I said, I wonder what else that guy's got for sale. I hit the seller's other item list, and he had 26 items there, and one said 4 old police pictures for $10. And I like them old police pictures because of my grandfather. I think about him a lot, and I'm like into them. I don't know, I guess, but so I clicked that on 4 old police pictures for $10 on eBay, and one of the pictures was my grandfather in 1934. And I called the guy up in Kentucky, Greenup, Kentucky. His name's Steve. And I asked, how did you get a picture of my grandfather down there like that? He said he's a retired police officer down there. He bought that about 10 years ago on eBay, and he's 74 years old. And he's just reselling some things that he had laying around or what. And, he said he actually had 2 original copies of my grandfather. It's a cool picture. He's on a 1934 Harley Davidson at the dealership in his uniform. It's a super cool picture.
Yeah.
And he had 2 of them. He sold me the other one. I mailed him some money. And the reason I knew that picture was about 12 years ago, I would go visit my mother and dad's grave in Belle Vernon, PA. And I was feeling bad about my life. I was 52 years old, and my life was really not good. And I was having like some issues. And I'd go there to feel better about my life, just contemplate things. And so I seen Grandpa's headstone there, and I thought, you know, I never had no grandparents. My mom and dad were older when they had me. So I really needed my grandpa. I just looked at his headstone. I said, man, I wish I had grandpa. I started thinking about being a 4-month-old baby in his arms when he had pancreas cancer, and he died. And I never knew much about him, you know, and it caught my mind, I guess.
So Charles, I just want to ask, like, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you short, but we've got a few other calls in the line. I just want to know, like, how does this like relate back to God and changing your life? Like where does this go?
Well, my heart drew really heavy, and I believed in God. I never went to church or nothing. And I cried out to God to change my life, and He sure did. I'm a really good person now. No issues, no problems, and
So let's dig into that then. How did God change your life to make you a good person?
Well, I had issues with drugs and just immorality, I guess, a little bit. And it just kind of affected my life where I was alone. And I really just, my family was dead. And I just, it affected my heart like a little bit. And it's like almost like God drew me in.
So would it be fair to say you were struggling with some things that you knew weren't the way you wanted to live? You weren't weren't living the direction you wanted to live, and you weren't living the line of life you wanted to live. And so you found something that gave you social structure and a sense of community, and that helped you, the support, to get your life on the track that you wanted in the first place. Is that a fair summary of what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
Cool.
I think I might throw in there too. It sounds like you had a mindset shift. You know, you had a time when you knew you wanted things to change and you found a way that enabled you to make that shift within yourself. And I don't think most atheists want to take anything away from anybody if that's something that you experience and find valuable. I'm curious, are you calling in because you think that's sort of a more generalizable thing, that if people find God, this happens? Or is it just to share that that's what happened for you?
Well, personally, I started reading about religious stuff, and I kind of believe that I was chosen, I dare to say, because I had a lot of really miraculous things happen. You don't have time to hear it, but I mean, these are really bona fide.
What's the best one? Like, what's the most convincing miracle? Because you're right, we don't have time for all of them, but like, as an example, what's like the coolest miracle that you experienced?
Well, I met a lady in Bible study, and I was telling her my story, and she said, told me what happened to her. Her dad's name was David Turney, and he died in 2016. She said 2 sisters, they cried for 6 months over that, and they said one day, let's go to the mountains in Maryland, in Deep Creek, Maryland, and spend a day together, put this behind us. So she did, and they met a couple up there that like to go bowling. They did too, and they went to the bowling alley in Oakland, Maryland. And coming home, she told her sister they had a good time there. The sister Googled the bowling alley, and the bowling alley was located on David Turney Street in Oakland, Maryland. And the lady's name is Haley. She lives in Belle Vernon, PA. That's her dad's name, David Turney.
Right.
She went up there, and they just led to the bowling alley located on David Turney Street in Oakland, Maryland. And she said, there can't be that many David Turneys. So I said, lady, I've never heard that name before. And I said, I know through my miracles that you were led up there. And she's a super nice lady. She works at the college in the admissions department, and a really nice 37-year-old Bible study teacher. And she had no idea that bowling, she liked the bowl, you know.
Right. So, like, but that's the thing. Like, my dad's name was Heinz, and I miss him terribly. He died about a decade ago. I don't get like the feeling that I'm experiencing a sign every time I pick up a bottle of Heinz ketchup. You know, it's just that's a name. And I just Googled just for fun. I just looked up David Turney on Google, and I've got here one of these find a person websites that has 189 matches. And so like, yeah, that you're right. That is a coincidence. Like, wow, there's a street with this guy's name. That's pretty cool. But humans have this really bad habit of seeking patterns and finding meaning in things that are relatively kind of meaningless, maybe interesting and coincidental, but still not really meaningful. There's epiphania and pareidolia, patternicity, these phenomena that we experience where we see shapes in clouds and in stars and meaning from meaningless data.
Or like sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
But when I first learned that San Luis Obispo was a place and not just a funny sequence of sounds, I started hearing about it everywhere to the point when I actually started thinking, is there something in San Luis Obispo that I'm supposed to be doing here?
Right.
I think that these things, we notice them. And I think it's totally okay to be like, I'm grieving. Hey, this reminds me of this is the same name. What an interesting coincidence. And again, give that meaning if you want to. But I look at it and I just think that doesn't really mean anything to me or to perhaps other unbelievers. Like, I'm glad that there were healing experiences. I don't see them as evidence of miracles, though, when they can pretty easily happen in completely mundane ways, too.
Does that make sense, Charles, what we're saying?
Yeah, I can respect your thoughts on it, but I mean, this happened to me several times. I mean, it's really far-fetched coincidences that were really, and I know that I prayed. I don't know if you call it pray. I kneeled down in my bed and I talked to God about things, and I've had so many things, just unique things happen that I met a lady that my sister saved her life from drowning 40 years ago. Not long after I prayed about my little sister, she died about 12 years ago. And I prayed about her. I need to know she's okay. And I see my buddy the next day at the Dollar General store, and he told me that he woke up at 5 a.m. and he thought about my sister, Tracy.
Right.
He said that he heard a voice that remember when she saved that girl at Ohio Powell State Park. He said, that was 40 years ago. I said, man, I prayed about her last night and you woke up. And I said, you think that was God? He said, he really did. And I went up to Ohio Powell State Park and prayed a little bit. And a month later, I met that same lady that she randomly met her.
Yeah.
that she saved her life in church.
So Charles, let me ask you just two brief questions, and because we got to move on to the next call, but like I just want to ask you two things. Number one, how many times have you prayed and then not gotten a miraculous result like this?
Usually I just pray about money. I don't get that, or to be able to have my stories known, like publicly. No, that doesn't happen. I don't think God has it in his time.
So you pray for some things and they don't happen, and you pray for other things that are more related to, like, community, because you live around people, right? You have families, you have friends, you have extended friends, there's millions of people that are connected to you one way or another. That kind of thing, we get answers to prayer. But when it comes to like winning the lottery or like, getting your name out there or whatever like that, these very rare things, prayers don't work very well on that. Do you think maybe there's a bit of confirmation bias here where you're seeing things that are maybe a little bit coincidental, but coincidences happen all the time, and you're looking for meaning in that? Meanwhile, all the things that you're not getting from prayer, you're not attributing that to saying, okay, so prayer doesn't work in this way. It's just saying, okay, well, God didn't want to do it, but he did do these other things that have an explanation. Like, does that not kind of sit weird with you?
Yeah, like to say things that you really don't need anyway, money or whatever, but things from the heart that really grabs my heart. When I talk to God, I said, this is like urgent a little bit. I kind of talk to him like that a little bit. And the next day or two, something really crazy happened. I took that picture of my grandfather to Staples about 2 years ago. I asked that lady, can you blow this up, make me a couple copies? Her name's Samantha, the photo manager. She said, yeah. She looked at it. She said, that's weird. I said, what is it? She said she went to visit her sister out in Ohio last Christmas, and her sister's boyfriend had that same picture hanging on their wall in their bathroom, and they don't know who that is. I said, that's my grandpa. Yeah. I wasn't even surprised that much over it, because I said, I have so many crazy things happen that, the photo manager, Samantha at the Staples, she looked at that picture of my grandpa, and she said went to visit her sister out in Ohio last Christmas, and her sister's boyfriend had that same exact picture hanging on the wall in her bathroom.
I mean,
that's the coincidence. Coincidence, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you again. And it is really interesting as a story. It reminds me, my grandfather lived in Eastern Oregon for 50 years, and he's everywhere. And my great-grandparents are everywhere. And it's really cool to be able to go and find pictures of them or something named after them. I don't think it's necessarily evidence of God, which might offend my grandfather. He was a preacher. But it makes me feel good. And I love those stories. I don't think it's really that shocking, though, in an area with not that many people necessarily, or with the same families who've lived around for quite a while, that we would see pictures of them. I also love old pictures. It's wonderful stories to share. I still kind of
close out. Maybe you're probably about done with me here, but if you look on my TikTok channel, it's called Truth Dog 4, and I made a video, and it has a picture of my grandfather in it, and a model that I found in the Goodwill store the very next day after I framed that picture. There was a model of a 1934 Harley Davidson with a sidecar, same thing Grandpa had, but it was in the Goodwill store the very next day. And I actually went in the Goodwill the day I got the frame, nothing was in there, and I had the next day off. I went back in the Goodwill. There was a model of a 1934 Harley with a sidecar. But look at my Truth Dog 4.
I'm not going to do that. But hey, Charles, I just really quickly, the last thing that I want to ask you, and this is where it really get into the meat of it, because like we can sit here all day and talk about like, well, this weird thing happened to me and that was God. And then I'll tell you some weird shit that happened to me and I don't believe it was God. You know what I mean? We can do that for a while. I guess the biggest thing that stuck out to me that you said, and then we'll be done after this, is that you said that, the reason why prayer doesn't work for money and the reason why prayer doesn't work for fame, but it does work when it's a thing with your family, is because these are things that are really weighing on your heart and that it really matters to you, and you ask God about those types of things. And like, I guess my question is, why then isn't prayer 100% reliable when, like, say, for example, someone has a child with cancer that's dying in the hospital and they pray about it? Why isn't God answering all of those prayers? Because surely those weigh on people's hearts, and they're selfless prayers. They don't involve money or fame. Like, why aren't those prayers working, but your prayer to, like, see somebody who had a memory of your sister from a while ago, that's what God's interested in? Why is that the case?
Yeah, I've been told I have a prophetic gift, and I did pray about little children having cancer, laying there in the hospital bed dying. And I prayed about that, and God gave me the thought that he took their soul to heaven already. That little baby laying there, dying child, actually has an angel in their body, and they know how to mimic that little kid, saying, "Mommy, mommy, I love you," and all that.
So it's just giving that parent a
horrible.
tremendous amount of grief and trauma. That's the point. The baby isn't hurting. It's just the parents that need to experience a tremendous amount of grief and pain and suffering. That's the goal.
They experience a great amount of joy whenever they reach heaven and they see their little baby there.
I don't know that.
I got you. So if I beat the crap out of somebody now, it's okay because they're going to feel happy later when they're not being beaten anymore. Yeah.
I would also point out that there are quite a few people who lose their faith in God because they go through something like that with a child. So the idea that you have an imitation angel, it actually sounds like an Irish fairy. Like, this is starting to sound very mythical.
Right.
Torturing these parents by making them watch their child go through something horrifying that they can't understand. And then that parent loses their faith and they never see that baby in heaven. So all that was accomplished is torment. That's horrifying.
Yeah, maybe they were tested. I really don't know why he does things. I know he's real. I absolutely know because of things that happened, many things in my life that are just.
Well, that's the thing, Charles, is that like I don't know why Ted Bundy did the things that he did either, but I'm not going to say that there might have been some positive outcome to it and that maybe he was a good guy. It's just I think we're doing a lot of the legwork for this God by trying to say, okay, well, when he does good things, that's because he's good, and when he does horrible things, that's because he's mysterious. Like I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way for anybody else. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next call, but I really appreciate you calling in and being so polite and so cordial with us. I encourage you to call back in another time if you want to have another conversation with us, okay?
I may do that. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Charles. Take care. Have a good day.